My name is Mei Chen, and this is the story of how my father-in-law's attempt to steal my dream house revealed a historical treasure that would change everything. The Victorian mansion at 47 Maple Grove had been my obsession since I first saw it as an architecture student. Built in 1952 by renowned architect Theodore Hammond, it was his last project, and according to local legend, his masterpiece. But the house had fallen into disrepair over the decades, its grandeur fading behind overgrown ivy and neglect. When it came up for auction last year, I was ready. 10 years of saving, of building my architectural practice, of waiting for this exact moment. My husband James supported my dream, even though his father, Richard Harrison, thought it was ridiculous. An old house? Richard had scoffed at our family dinner. And you want to restore it? Who would trust a foreign architect with an American historic property? I'd learned to ignore such comments from my father-in-law. As one of Boston's elite real estate developers, he believed history was something to be bulldozed and replaced with luxury condos. The fact that his son had married a Chinese-American architect who believed in preservation was a constant source of irritation. But I won the auction. The house was mine, and with it, a chance to restore Hammond's forgotten masterpiece to its former glory. The problem started 3 months into the restoration. I'd been meticulously documenting everything, photographing each room, researching period details. That's when I found the first anomaly, a wall that shouldn't have been there according to the city's plans. The blueprints must be wrong, James suggested when I showed him. But I knew better. Theodore Hammond was famous for his precision, his attention to detail. His blueprints were never wrong. I hired ground-penetrating radar specialists to examine the house's structure. Their findings were puzzling. There were spaces in the walls that didn't appear on any official plans, rooms that seemed to exist but had no entrances. Then came the Historical Society's interest. Maria Santos, their lead researcher, was as intrigued as I was. Hammond's personal papers suggest this wasn't just a house, she explained, showing me letters we'd uncovered. He designed it for someone specific, someone who needed special features. The more we dug, the more mysterious the house became, and the more nervous Richard Harrison got. It started with friendly offers to buy the property. Then came suggestions that the restoration was too expensive, that I was risking James's financial future. Finally, he showed his true hand. The city's rezoning this area, he announced one evening, arriving unannounced at our temporary apartment. Prime location for my new development project. 40 luxury units. The old house has to go. I refused to sell. That's when he played his final card. James, he said, turning to my husband, it's time to choose. Your inheritance or your wife's foolish dream. I watched my husband's face pale. The Harrison family money was substantial, and Richard had always used it as a leash to control his children. But what Richard didn't know was that I discovered something in the house's hidden spaces, something that made his threats meaningless. 2 days earlier, Maria and I had found a hidden door behind the library's oak paneling. Behind it was a room that didn't exist on any official plans, and inside that room was a safe containing Theodore Hammond's personal documents about the house. The truth was astonishing. The mansion hadn't just been Hammond's last project. It had been built as a safe house for the Underground Railroad, designed with hidden rooms and escape routes that were still intact. The 1952 construction had been a careful preservation of the original 1850 structure, disguised as a new build to protect its secrets. The Historical Society was already preparing the paperwork for National Historic Landmark status. Once approved, the house would be protected from any development. But before we could file the paperwork, Richard made his move. Sign this, he demanded, throwing a document on our table. Sell the house to my development company for $1, or James loses everything. His inheritance, his position in the family business, everything. I looked at James, saw the conflict in his eyes. It's not worth losing your family over, he whispered. So I signed. Richard's triumphant smile as he clutched the paper was almost comical. He didn't even bother to read the full document, too eager to claim his victory. Clear out your things by Monday, he ordered. The demolition crew arrives Tuesday. After he left, James turned to me in despair. I'm so sorry, May. I never thought he'd go this far. I hugged him, smiling despite everything. Don't worry, your father really should learn to read contracts more carefully. Because what Richard didn't know was that I'd sold him more than just a house. I'd sold him a historical landmark application already in process, a property about to become federally protected, and evidence of his own attempted fraud in trying to destroy a critical piece of American history. Monday was going to be very interesting indeed. Monday morning dawned bright and clear. I stood on the mansion's front steps with Maria Santos and a team from the Historical Society, watching Richard Harrison's Mercedes pull up to the curb. His demolition crew waited in their trucks behind him, ready to begin destroying history. "What's all this?" Richard demanded, stalking up the walkway. "I thought I told you to clear out." Actually, Maria stepped forward. "Mrs. Chen invited us to document the official declaration of 47 Maple Grove as a National Historic Landmark." Richard's face reddened. "What are you talking about? I own this property." "Yes," I agreed pleasantly, "you do. Congratulations on purchasing one of the most significant Underground Railroad sites in New England." I handed him a thick folder containing Hammond's original documents, the Historical Society's findings, and most importantly, the federal protection order that had been expedited once we'd proven the house's historical significance. "This is impossible," Richard sputtered, flipping through the pages. "The house was built in 1952. "That's what Theodore Hammond wanted everyone to believe," Maria explained. "But the original structure dates to 1850. Hammond's 1952 construction was actually a brilliant preservation project designed to protect the house's secrets." As if on cue, a line of cars pulled up. Local news vans, Preservation Society members, and most devastating for Richard, his biggest competitors in the real estate market, all eager to witness this historic moment. "You can't do this," Richard hissed at me. "We have a contract." "Yes, we do," I smiled. "A contract for the sale of a historic property, which you signed without reading the full disclosure addendum. The one that detailed the house's historical status application and your legal obligations as its new owner." James, who had been quietly watching, stepped forward. "It's over, Dad. You wanted the house? Now you have it, and all the responsibilities that come with it." Those responsibilities were substantial. As the owner of a National Historic Landmark, Richard was now legally obligated to preserve and maintain the property according to strict federal guidelines. Any alterations required extensive approval, and demolition was completely forbidden. The news cameras rolled as Maria led the first official tour of the house, revealing its extraordinary secrets: the hidden rooms that had sheltered escaped slaves, the cleverly designed ventilation systems that carried messages through the walls, the underground tunnel that led to the river, now preserved behind glass panels. Theodore Hammond was a genius, I explained to the reporters. In 1952, when urban renewal threatened this house, he didn't just save it, he hid it in plain sight. He created a modern facade that protected the original structure, then designed his new house around the historical elements. The story exploded across national media. "Hidden history discovered. Underground Railroad station preserved in plain sight," read the headlines. Architectural magazines clamored for interviews about Hammond's innovative preservation techniques. Historical societies praised the perfect marriage of 1850s courage and 1950s ingenuity. Richard, trapped by his own greed, watched his development dreams crumble. The property he'd schemed to acquire for $1 was now worth millions, but as a museum and historical site, not as real estate. The final blow came from his own board of directors. They saw an opportunity in this PR disaster. "Think about it," his CEO suggested. "Harrison Development, protector of historical treasures. We could renovate the carriage house into a visitor center, sponsor educational programs. The publicity would be worth more than any luxury condo project." 6 months later, I stood in Theodore Hammond's hidden library, now restored to its original glory, watching visitors marvel at the architectural details I'd helped preserve. The house had become a symbol of both historical resistance and modern preservation. Richard, surprisingly, had embraced his new role as custodian of history after his board made it clear his position depended on it. He even funded a scholarship for architectural students focusing on historical preservation. "You knew this would happen," James said one evening as we watched the sunset from the house's restored Widow's Walk. "When you signed that contract, you knew exactly how it would play out." I smiled, remembering Hammond's words in his personal journal, which we'd found in the hidden safe. "Architecture isn't just about buildings. It's about protecting the stories our walls have witnessed, the truths they've sheltered, the lives they've saved. The house continues to reveal its secrets. Each restoration project uncovers new details about its role in history. Descendants of people who passed through its hidden rooms during their journey to freedom have come forward with stories preserved in family histories. We maintained our apartment in the renovated carriage house, where I run my architectural practice specializing in historical preservation. The firm's reputation soared after the Hammond House discovery, and we now consult on preservation projects across the country. Richard and I have reached an understanding of sorts. He's learned that not all value can be measured in square footage and profit margins. Sometimes the greatest worth lies in the stories our buildings tell, the histories they preserve, the legacies they protect. Last week, he actually asked my opinion on another historic property his company is considering preserving. "We need to do this right," he said, without a trace of his former condescension. The history matters. The Hammond House stands proud on Maple Grove, its secrets now celebrated instead of hidden. School groups tour the underground passages, historians study its innovative design, and architecture students sketch its clever solutions to the challenge of hiding freedom seekers in plain sight. As for me, I got my dream house after all, not as an owner, but as its lead preservation architect. Every morning, I walk through its halls, touching the walls that have sheltered so many secrets, feeling the weight of the stories they still have to tell. Theodore Hammond's last project wasn't just a house. It was a bridge between centuries, a testament to the power of architecture to protect not just people, but truth itself. His genius lay not in creating something new, but in preserving something precious in a way that would outlast its enemies. In the end, Richard's attempt to destroy history had only served to protect it. His $1 purchase didn't buy him a development opportunity. It bought him a place in the continuing story of 47 Maple Grove, a story that began with the courage of the Underground Railroad and continues with each new generation that discovers its secrets. The house that was meant to be demolished now stands as a monument to preservation, a reminder that some things are worth more than money, and that the greatest architecture does more than shelter bodies. It protects our shared history and the truths we dare not forget. Every time I see a new visitor's eyes widen as they discover another of the house's secrets, I think of Hammond's words, now engraved on a plaque in the entrance. In architecture, as in life, our greatest achievements are often the truths we protect, the histories we preserve, and the stories we pass on to those who come after us. Richard's dollar bill is framed in the visitor center, a reminder that sometimes the smallest transactions can lead to the biggest transformations, if we're willing to look beyond the surface to the treasures hidden within.